She will only marry a man with the name Earhest, and at the end of the play, it turns out that Jack and Algy are in reality brothers. So, a person who was seen at the Victorian railway station, left abandoned, finally gets a name, finally gets an identity, finally has secured a position, and in some ways, that's the reason he secures the hand of Fairfax. But more importantly, the other person who also somewhere is leading equally a dual life, who comes as Earhest when he comes back to the countryside, there is a topsy-turvy turn in the plot, because somehow we come to know about their deceptions in the end, and that marks the farce, the comic in the play, yet a farce which needs to be questioned. Therefore, when we look at the outside, it looks as a very simple play with a very straightforward narrative, but it's now Madhurita who will give you a more serious, critical view of what goes beneath the narrative and why the play has remained still a fascination today.
Well, the plot superficially seems to be very interesting, full of humor, but if we can look at the slide, it shows that the plot raises many questions, and 3 questions have been taken up by us. The first question is, how can Gwendolen possibly be in love with the name Earhest? Why are they so much fixated with this name Earhest? The second question that comes to our mind is, isn't there something absurd about Jack calling himself Earhest when he actually is Earhest? His real name is Earhest. And the third question, which is an absurd question, of course, is how can a baby be misplaced in a handbag at a railway station? Imagine a baby being misplaced in a handbag at a railway station. Now, these questions bring to us some of the improbabilities of the play, and these improbabilities lead us to the subtitle of the play, that is, it is a trivial comedy for serious people. So the incidents are trivial, the subjects are serious, the subjects which are serious that are made trivial, and the trivial subjects are made serious. This again is closely linked with the philosophy of aestheticism, where there is a refusal to engage with reality, and this is the central principle of aestheticism. Now, unlike other 18th century satirists like Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope, Oscar Wilde had no motive to be a reformist. In fact, he had no intention to reform this world, and therefore this style is, his epigrammatic style is linked with the play's central metaphor, and the play's central metaphor is pretense, or we can call it Victorian hypocrisy. If we look at the other slide, which brings us to the central metaphor of the play, and that is Victorian hypocrisy. Now, there is this particular scene in which Jack proposes to Gwendolen, and in this scene we find a reversal of Victorian assumptions about gender roles. We find that propriety demanded that young women be weak, ineffectual, polite, behave like helpless vessels, full of admiration and passivity, whereas here we find Gwendolen to be very authoritative, very domineering, whereas we find Jack stammering when he is proposing. So in fact, Gwendolen takes over the entire business of marriage proposal out of Jack's hands, and she is the one who is leading. This, of course, leads us to the social commentary of this play, which is the Victorian concern with propriety. In fact, in the figure of Gwendolen, we find a woman who is obsessed with the name Earhest, and she is actually not obsessed with the quality of Earhest, which we had discussed earlier. The discussion, of course, leads us to some of the most important themes of the play, and we take each of the themes one by one. The most important theme that we come across in this play is the theme of marriage. marriage that is of paramount importance in the importance of being earnest. In fact, it plays a dual role. The first is it is a primary force that motivates the plot, and the second is that it is also a subject for philosophical speculation. It is also a subject for philosophical debate. In fact, the question of marriage, we find, is it appears for the first time when there is a discussion between Algernon and Lane. And here Algernon says that a marriage, in fact, a marriage proposal is a matter of pleasure. It is also a matter of business. So marriage is related with either business or with pleasure. Later on in the play, we find that Lady Bracknell also touches on the issue when she states that an engagement should come on a young girl as a pleasant surprise or an unpleasant surprise. In fact, we find that all the characters in this play have a set of assumptions about the nature and purpose of marriage, and these assumptions reflect the conventional preoccupations of Victorian respectability. We come to the second central theme of this play, and that is the constraints or the limitations of morality. We find that there have been a lot of constraints about morality, and it is of course closely seen as a favorite topic of conversation in the entire play. For example, we find Algy. He has this presupposed notion about the service class or the servant class, which has the responsibility to set a moral standard for the upper class. And these restrictions, in fact, suggest, these restrictions of morality, in fact, suggest that there is a strict code of morals that exists in Victorian society. And in fact, Oscar Wilde chose to write this play in order to break this strict code of morality. This, of course, leads us to the title of the play, and that is The Importance of Being Earnest, which discusses moral paradox. In fact, the play's central plot, which we see as a play about a man who is both earnest and who is also not earnest. So both the things have been taken together and brought up as moral paradox. We come to the third theme of this play, and that is hypocrisy or inventiveness. Of course, Victorian hypocrisy, we have talked about it for a long time. Hypocrisy, we find that through the characters, hypocrisy is revealed. Through the characters, inventiveness has been revealed. For example, Algernon, not Jack, we find is the play's real hero. Not only is Algernon like Wilde, is his dandified personality, he is also known for his exquisite wit, tastes and priorities, but he also resembles Oscar Wilde himself. In fact, Oscar Wilde in one of his interviews said that Algernon is my or was my alter ego. The fourth topic that the fourth theme that we discuss in this play is the title itself, and that is the importance of not being earnest. In fact, earnestness, which implies seriousness or sincerity, is the greatest enemy of morality in the importance of being earnest, as we notice. We find that earnestness or the quality of earnestness brings about many other qualities. For example, smugness, politeness, boringness, solemnity or sense of duty, and all these things, all these qualities Wilde saw as hallmarks of the Victorian character. So when characters in the play use the word serious, they tend to mean trivial and vice versa. For example, Algernon thinks it shallow for people not to be serious about meals. In fact, we have a long discussion about him asking for cucumber sandwiches, which again is a trivial matter. The next theme that is taken up by us is the theme of dual identities. In fact, as Dr. Zakia said, that both the important characters of this play, that is Jack and Algy, they live with dual identities, and these dual identities in fact create crisis in their lives, and all these crises get sorted out later on, but the process of the crisis leads to a lot of laughter. The last is idleness of the leisure class and the aesthete. In fact, we find that Algy can be called a hedonist, a person who enjoys to eat, to gamble, to gossip, and he is, on the other hand, he is very serious about cucumber sandwiches. He is serious about trivial things, and he is trivial about serious things. In fact, through this character, through Algy's character, we find that Algy is a representative of Oscar Wilde himself, and therefore through Algy, Oscar Wilde wants to state that art does not mirror reality. In fact, he subscribes to the 19th century philosophy of aestheticism, which we find through this play, which was espoused by Walter Pater. Now we come to some of the political issues of importance of being earnest. Now we have already discussed that these political issues were not the primary motive of Oscar Wilde when he wrote this play, but he could not even he could not bypass these political issues. In fact, we find that none of the characters, not a single character deals with the reality of the society, or in fact no characters relate with the politics of Ireland or the politics of England. And for example, the play revolves around the following subjects. Lady Bracknell examines Jack's suitability as a partner for Gwendolen. She inquires about politics. Jack is a liberal unionist. Now, one subject which has been taken up or which has been kept in the background is the subject of home rule for Ireland. This lady, we find that she is quite uneasy, and her uneasy feeling is related with the feeling of fear that is regarding the social unrest. In spite of the play being away from reality, in spite of the fact that the play had nothing to do with the politics of that time, why was the play a success? The play, which was staged in 1895, and it was an immediate success. Although it was written as a farce, The Importance of Being Earnest is actually an attack on Victorian society. It is an attack on social and moral hypocrisy of the people of that time. It is an attack on the social class system of that time. It is an attack on the attitude of marriage of that time. It is an attack on marriage as a social tool at that time. It is also an attack on the triviality of aristocratic life. In spite of all these things, why the play was successful, and the reasons can be two. The first is that the characters are distanced from the audience. The characters are away from reality, and therefore the audience is able to laugh at the characters, not only laugh at the characters but also laugh at their own society. And the second reason that we find is, of course, to do with Oscar Wilde's own style of writing, which we have discussed earlier, is called epigrammatic style. A few examples that we have chosen, which you can see on the slide. The first is, divorces are made in heaven. In fact, this epigram pokes fun at the popular phrase, a marriage made in heaven. Or the second example can be, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Again, it pokes fun at the phrase the pure and simple truth. And the third example that we have chosen is in marriage, 3 is company, 2 is none. Again, Wilde has taken the popular saying 2 is company, 3 is a crowd, and then adopted it to suit his own purpose. Now let us analyze some of the major characters of this play. Jack Worthing, who is the play's protagonist, he was discovered as an infant by the late Sir Thomas Cardew in a handbag in the cloakroom of a railway station in London. We find that Jack is the pillar of his community. He leads dual roles, he plays dual roles in his life. For example, in Hertfordshire, he is a responsible citizen. He is a guardian to Mr. Cardew's granddaughter Cecily. He has other duties and responsibilities as a citizen. People depend on him. There are people like servants, tenants, farmers, local clergymen. They all depend on him. Whereas the other side of his life, which he leads in London in the name of Earhest, where he escapes from reality. In fact, he leads the role of an irresponsible younger brother of his own life, and therefore these two lives that he leads makes him represent conventional Victorian values. He wants others to think that he adheres to the notion of duty, responsibility, honor, respect, whereas he himself hypocritically flouts all these notions. In fact, through this character, we find that Oscar Wilde was actually satirizing through Jack the general tolerance of hypocrisy of his own time.